Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia. Hong Kong, Macau has found a rather good formula. Taiwan is heading in that direction. Korea is doing not badly. With Vietnam, they have had warfare. But outside that pocket, China has not had a single invasion, occupation. What they did in October '62 about India, they withdrew immediately. And I myself am not on the Indian side on that issue. But leaving that aside, this means China has a free hand all over the world, because there is nobody who can say you were here 300 years ago and we remember what you did. And that they can say about all Western countries, and particularly about the US, with its tendency to send the Marines. China has much more freedom to act than the US has.
What about China? You just recently met with the Central Committee. What was that like?
Central Committee members. Well, I was sitting with the Deputy Foreign Minister, and we had a map, a world map, on the floor. And you see, peace studies, as opposed to the somewhat paranoid security studies, is about solutions. It's about equity, mutual and equal benefit. And this is exactly what the Chinese say they believe in. No, not inside that pocket, as I mentioned, but outside it. It was very easy to talk to them. We just went through the whole map, and we're discussing Chinese options. I can mention one example. And I'm just saying these are things that I mentioned. And to build a 4-lane highway from Dar es Salaam to Kinshasa's harbor on the Atlantic, expanding the Silk Route that was the world trade from 500 to 1500, globalized, incidentally, much before current globalization, run by Buddhists from China and surrounding countries and Muslims, ending in Somalia. And to expand that through the highway I just mentioned, maybe a railroad too, to the Atlantic and then on to South America. And then trade the other way, exchange of students, South-South, developing country, not dominated by China, but China as an anchor. That would be something, quite something. And not excluding North-South trade, but that was the imperial trade, you know. That was the United States to Latin America, and that was Europe and all the 11 colonial countries in Europe to Africa and other places. We cannot exclude it, we don't want to exclude it, but we want the East-West trade.
What is China's view of the United States?
They used to have a strong distinction between the US people, who are all good, and the US government, that's all bad. I think both of those have changed a little bit. There are good elements in the US government, and there are not so good elements in the US people. I think they start getting to know the US a little bit better, so yin-yang, black-white perspectives, nuances are coming up. They want cooperation. They have 3 avoidance principles. Avoid being encircled, avoid counter-revolution, and here they are thinking particularly of North Korea and Myanmar. Now, all of that leaves open quite a lot of discussion. And avoid confrontation with the US. They don't want confrontation, they want friendship. And right now they're of course very much concerned with the maneuvers in the Yellow Sea and also in the China Sea. And
who's maneuvering there?
US aircraft carrier together with South Korea in the Yellow Sea. Now that's very, very close. So you could imagine the Chinese Navy having maneuvers outside San Francisco, Los Angeles. It would not be very well received by Washington. So they're protesting. There are the need to avoid confrontation. If the US could do it the same way as China does, try to stay away from such things, it would be very, very useful.
Why doesn't the US avoid that? Why are they doing the maneuvers in the Yellow Sea?
Old habits, considering the world their playground. We did it before, that's the way we always did it. The US has to reset, to quote somebody who talks about it but hasn't quite done it.
How do you think the U.S. should end the conflict in Afghanistan?
I can start with what I hope. If the U.S. could support a real peace plan. So I've indicated points that I believe in, and there are many who believe along these lines. Something along these lines, that would be the best option for the U.S. The question is, as my Congress representative friends say, whether that can be sold to the voters and to other parts of Congress. Now, let us say that you have about 65 progressive members of the House of Representatives. Progressive meaning going along with solving conflict and not with military responses. Well, many people, good people, but we are talking about 435, aren't we? So we know where we are. We also know that of the 100 persons in the Senate, it would be very difficult to mobilize 65 people. Very difficult. So given that, the U.S. has in a sense been digging a grave for itself, meaning that becoming irrelevant is the option, like they did in Vietnam. They did in Vietnam, and Vietnam came together after 30 April 75, somebody climbing up a ladder to a helicopter hovering above the U.S. Embassy, and there might be similar things happening here. Now, if the U.S. wants to become irrelevant, if they prefer that, do so. I would much rather see the U.S. supporting a conference for peace and security, or let us call it security and cooperation in Central Asia. Maybe not even as a participant, but as an observer, because the U.S. is not quite known as a Central Asian country. Incidentally, it's not an East Asian country either. As far as I can see from the map, it belongs to the American hemisphere. And maybe it's in cooperation with Mexico and Canada, kind of Mexuscan, that the future of U.S. will be very well located. More modest, like an Israel contracting to June 67, but getting peace as a reward. Not a bad reward.
What is your assessment of President Obama?
I have never believed in him. Never. I have lots of editorials and things written in the election year. I think that I sense something slightly megalomaniac in him, which is disturbing. The idea of being able to unite all of the U.S., just as he unites skin colors and faiths and origins in his body. And for that reason, leaning over backwards to negotiate with the Republicans and taking on Republican points, whereupon the Republicans vote no. Now, maybe the Republicans will now change from being a no party to some couple of maybe or yeses, maybe. But in the meantime, he has lost the support of the people who are voting for him. If I had been working like mad in 2008 to get him elected because of some beauties in his rhetoric and had experienced what I have experienced now, I would not work for the midterm elections.
What do you think he has gone back on in terms of his promises?
Practically speaking, everything. Guantanamo is still there. Rendition is still there. There is the saying that no torture should take place. I haven't seen the mechanism to ensure that that's the case. The withdrawal from Iraq with 50,000 remaining, stepping up, escalating the war in Afghanistan. And as we know, whatever withdraws from Iraq essentially goes to Afghanistan instead. I think it's very contrary to the kind of thing that he was exuding. Including the nuclear point. What kind of thing is this, to get rid of old-fashioned weapons with the Russians? And then arguing for $180 billion to modernize the nukes. $100 billion for the weapons carriers, $80 billion for new warheads. What kind of nuclear-free world is this? He should have had the decency, when Norway made the mistake of giving him the Nobel Peace Prize, of saying, I graciously, gratefully decline. I haven't earned it yet. Let's come back when possibly I have earned it. He didn't say that, and dispensed with the prize money in a disgraceful way. to all kinds of irrelevant organizations. He didn't even give it to US peace organizations. Let me just mention one, the American Friends Service Committee, which is a fantastic organization doing marvelous work all over the world. Could have given the whole thing to them.
Is there anything else you'd like to add here in Bonn?
This is a remarkable gathering of people who are working on very positive things. And there isn't one single person here who doesn't have a solution to something. I would say the world should pay attention to these people. These are very positive people. And these are not people who have just derived some expertise from one conflict. The Nobel Peace Prize winners usually know nothing except that one conflict. And too much is demanded of them because they're not able to generalize from that. These are people who have done a lot of thinking and a lot of practice. I'm just very grateful that this so-called alternative Nobel Peace Prize exists, and the Right Livelihood Award. 5 prizes every year, 30 years, 150, 80 of them, a slim majority, are assembled here.
Professor Galtung, thank you very much.
My pleasure, thank you.
Founder of Peace Studies, Johan Galtung, speaking here in Bonn. Tomorrow, Canadian farmer Percy Schmeiser versus Monsanto. I'm Amy Goodman from Bonn, Germany. Thanks for joining us.